All right,
Great.
I'll second.
All right, great. Thank you, Brian. And thank you everybody for being here on this, this beautiful afternoon. I think we generally start all of these by calling the meeting to order, which is, you know, you're already here and done, and then opening up for public comments. So I will ask if anybody wants to make a public comment. Please raise your, I guess, virtual hand is probably the easiest way to see. But if you have trouble with that, just feel free to come off of mute as well. So I'll give that about 30 seconds to see if anybody takes us up on that. Okay. I don't think that there's any public comment, but you've got a few more seconds to raise your hand if there is. So before we move on to the consent agenda, and just one more look, sweep, no public comments. Okay. Then we'll move to item 3 on the agenda, which is the consent agenda. And there are 2 items on the consent agenda for approval today. One is the meeting minutes from our last meeting, and the second is a CPACE extension. Excuse me. So for the meeting minutes, can I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Thank you. And a second?
I'll second, Lonnie.
Thank you, Lonnie. Was there any discussion of the meeting minutes? Any clarifications, edits that folks wanted to raise? All right. Hearing none, could I please hear all the ayes for approving the minutes?
Aye.
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 All right. Any nays? Any abstentions? All right. So moved. Thank you all for that. We'll move on to the second resolution, which is a CPACE extension. Is there someone on staff that wanted to discuss this beyond what we have written in the agenda?
No, it's just a pretty straightforward extension of the approval date for an additional 120 days for this project related to Cheshire.
Yep. Great. Do I have a motion to approve the extension?
So moved.
Thank you. Second?
I'll second.
Okay. Any discussion or questions from the board or from the committee? Okay, hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you. All opposed? Any abstentions? All right, great. Thank you very much. We'll move to the next item, which was an item related to energy storage solutions. So I think we have about 30 minutes allocated for this, and I would love to turn it over to, it's a broader discussion, I see. I'd like to turn it over to Sergio and Ed and Sarah to discuss.
Thank you. We're on? Yes. All right. So thanks.
All right.
Oh, Sergio, are you on?
Yes, I'm here. I'm sorry, I was muted.
Okay.
But yes, joining me today is Sarah Pine and Ed Kranich. They're members of the energy storage team, and this is, I think we're here to deliver great news and expecting to receive approvals for all of these projects. So Ed, if you want to go ahead.
Sure. Thanks. Our first agenda item here starts off with the Scale Microgrid Solutions projects. But if you advance to the next slide here, before we get into all of the projects, we just wanted to do a quick overview of what we're looking at because it's quite a few projects. So it's 26 projects in total from 5 developers representing 6 customers. So there's a few who are installing multiple batteries at multiple sites, same customer with multiple sites. 22 of these projects are in Eversource territory for UI. Happy to see that 8 are on a grid edge circuit and 12 are located in a distressed municipality.
Describe those. Describe this. What grid edge means.
Oh, sure. So the grid edge circuit in energy storage solutions refers to customers on a circuit that experiences a greater frequency or longer average duration of power outages than average customers of that utility. So what we're seeing here in terms of benefits is customers that are kind of disproportionately affected by outages, and 8 of which will be benefiting from backup for that reason. 12 of these projects are in a DECD designated distressed municipality, and that represents 8 different towns, which we will go through on our list of projects. So there's a couple projects actually, or a couple towns where there are multiple projects, which is exciting to see. The equipment.
Sorry. And maybe you're going to get into this, but this is Dominic. Just as we're talking about like the totals of the incentives and the funding, maybe a quick refresher as to like the source of the funding for these incentives and the investment and sort of how that flows through would be helpful too.
Sure. Sergio, do you want to?
Yeah, I'll be glad to
take us from
provide
the
that.
top here. Thanks.
Yeah, to take that one. So Dominic, the way it works is that we pay the incentives when these projects come online, only when they come online. So we're not expected to issue these incentives until probably 2025, 2026, 2027 or beyond, depending on the size of the program or the project and how long they sit in the interconnection queue. So we're going to have to fund upfront those incentives, and then those incentives will be cost recovered through rates. We will need to file those incentives into the utilities RAM proceedings. It's a process that happens every January. There's a decision from PURA around May-ish. Then when they approve those rate adjustment mechanisms, those additional costs, the approved costs go into rates that are effective in September. So, and then we start recovering, invoicing the utilities on a monthly basis, 1/12 of the incentives spent the previous year. So there will be a 12-18-month lag between the moment we pay out the incentives and the moment we fully recover them from ratepayers.
Great, that's helpful. So I think there's a slide later where you kind of talk about like what this means to the overall tranching and the deployment. But this is kind of looking forward to that second tranche and kind of filling that up, and it'll be spent over several years.
Yes.
Got it. Thanks.
Thanks, Sergio. So in this batch of projects, we have a total of 57.1 megawatts, representing 151 megawatt hours of energy. In terms of total capacity of these storage systems, the total among the 5 developers is $19.4 million in upfront incentives, which, as Sergio described, will be paid out probably between 2025 and 2027 and recovered in the subsequent 12 to 18 months afterward. And total investment in terms of the total estimated project costs, which at this point in the process, all these projects have started the interconnection process, and they've drawn up rough estimates of what the equipment will cost, installation and operations. So this number is subject to change, but it's $140.5 million in total investment. And finally, one important aspect of this is that all of these projects here, which have a total estimated upfront incentive of greater than $500,000, need to be approved by June 15th. So PURA, as our regulator and overseer of this program, had taken note of the fact that the previous tranches, as you may remember, filled up rather quickly. This program is about 4 to 5 years ahead of schedule right now in terms of how much capacity we've received for applications. We expected to go through our first 50 megawatt tranche in the first 3 years, 2022 through 2025. And the next 3-year tranche, which was 2026 to 2029, was, well, we're about all the way through it now with this batch of projects. So Pura looked at that and they thought that maybe the market was moving too fast, maybe the incentives were too good. So they wanted us to pause the upfront incentive approvals for all commercial applications by June 15th, which is the start of our 3-year annual, or our 3-year review period for the program. So at this point, once these projects are approved, we will stop approving new commercial projects and await Pura's direction in terms of what we should do for coming up with the next round of incentive rates. And then on the right side of the screen here, I just have photos here just so you can get an idea of what we're looking at in terms of equipment. The 2 large batteries, these 2 large containerized batteries are the Narada battery, which is paired with an Ingeteam inverter, and then the Tesla Megapack, which is all encompassed with the Tesla equipment. Those are the 2 most popular batteries so far on this side of the program, the C&I side. And then on the right, we have definitely not to scale, a Cadenza CI 48,000 series battery, which is a rack-mounted piece of equipment. That piece of equipment is about probably about 5 feet tall, so definitely not to scale. But in the Danbury project that we'll get to a little bit later on, there's going to be 360 of those installed, so 1 for each apartment. So with that, I will move on. So the first project up here, we have 2 projects from Scale Microgrids. Scale Microgrids joined Energy Storage Solutions maybe 2 months ago. The first customer here is the manufacturer of metal parts that are used in all sorts of heavy industries. They process about 35,000 tons of steel annually. And they're called Rex Forge. This is a photo from their workshop in Southington, Connecticut, and they will be planning to install 4 Tesla Megapacks for a total of about 7.7 megawatts of power. Their next project from Scale Microgrids is Winstanley Enterprises, which they're a commercial real estate investor and developer. But this specific location pictured on the right here is a warehouse facility that's currently occupied by Lego and Coca-Cola. System size is 1 standard Tesla Megapack, 1,927 kilowatts. And it's located in Enfield, which is a distressed municipality. So here's our project summary, including the total upfront incentive calculations and the total estimated performance incentives. We also have the total cost of these projects. For the Scale Microgrids projects, it's about $17 million in total for the installed cost for both of them. And the total and the total estimated upfront incentive is $1.927 million.
Can I ask you all to provide an overview of what the property owners do in terms of when they receive the upfront incentive, what they're obligated to then do, and then how they receive the performance-based incentive and what that does for ratepayers? So if you could just speak to some of that design. This is where we're going to continue to do some of this to further educate our board members.
Yeah, absolutely. So in the upfront incentive section here, so you'll see the first one, Rex Forge, has a $1.5 million upfront incentive calculated. In exchange for that upfront incentive, the operator of the battery, which in this case would be Scale Microgrids, they would program the battery to participate in passive dispatch, which is our our name for sort of our set it and forget it setting of discharging energy to the grid. For passive dispatch, the owner of the battery would agree for 10 years in the months of June, July, and August to have their battery just automatically discharged to meet their on-site demand from 3 to 8 p.m. So for a large industrial customer like Rex Forge, I'm sure they have a pretty peaky demand during business hours, and especially during the summer when they probably have a high cooling load. The battery will be programmed to discharge to meet their demand, and then any excess will be sent off to the grid. Anytime during the months of June, July, August, or September, if the utilities have a better idea of when they think the peak will occur for the grid, they will cancel whatever passive dispatch event was planned for that day and instead call an active dispatch event. The active event will work the same way. The battery will discharge to meet whatever demand is on site and send any excess back off to the grid as a way to lower the overall grid demand. And the goal for the entire season is to avoid the seasonal peak for Connecticut. So when we have enough batteries participating in both of these sides of the program, it can have a pretty big impact, especially when they're in the megawatt range. So off season, in the spring and fall, the batteries can be used as the owner and operator likes. They can use it for backup power. They can use it to still do demand arbitrage to save money during those months, but they're not obligated to dispatch in the spring and fall. And in the winter time, there are maybe 2 to 3 winter events that we call where we pay a little bit lower of a performance incentive. That usually occurs sometime in February, but for the most part, winter is pretty uneventful in terms of using the batteries. So I hope that was helpful. Sure.
Yeah,
right.
let me just add that summer peak demand reduction, produced by these batteries, is what's going to translate into lower capacity transmission and energy charges for the utilities, right? Those savings are going to be spread across all ratepayers, and those are the benefits that are paying for these incentives.
Thank you, sir.
Yep. And that's what goes into what's shown on the project tear sheets, the program benefit cost analyses, all those initials on there, the ratepayer impact measurement, all these projects pencil out in terms of meeting those requirements for ratepayer impact. Right. There's a hand up.
Yeah, it's not just, I really appreciate the background. I think is helpful. Like I said, getting familiar with these programs. So the performance incentive is then paid out over the life of the agreement. I assume that's right. You talked about
Right.
that. Yeah. Okay. And
Right.
that's
So enrollment is for 10 years total. And so that the passive that I described for the upfront incentive is one side of the program. And then anytime the battery participates in an active event, which is called, there could be anywhere from 30 to 60 called every summer. At the end of the season, the battery's performance is tallied up, and the owner is paid a rate, or they're paid an amount dependent on how much power on average they sent to the grid during all of those events.
okay. So that number could be less if for whatever reason their system is down or they don't get called as much.
Right. They could also decline any event if they so choose as well. So if they would rather keep the power in their battery, they can do that, and they would just take a 0 for that event and receive a lower payment. So yes, that's a good point. The estimated performance incentive could be higher or it could be lower.
Okay. Thanks.
And those are paid directly by the utility companies, so Eversource or UI directly to the customer. Oops.
Okay. All right. I'm assuming that this means we're ready for the resolution vote.
Yes,
right.
that's right.
No, it's fine. I just didn't know if there was more, and we've got several of these, so I like the pattern. So appreciate the prompt. Thank you for that information. Do we have a motion to approve resolution number 3 related to scale microgrid solutions?
So moved, Matt.
Okay, and is there a second?
Second, Lonnie.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The resolution passes. On to the next batch, which is C-Power, and back to the team.
All right, thank you. This next batch and the subsequent one should go a little bit quicker now that we've established our pattern here. So getting up to the next one, we have one project here from C-Power. C-Power has a number of projects in our queue. Currently, they've participated quite a bit in the first tranche. They have about a dozen projects in ESS to date. Their customer that they brought to us is Marmon Utility, which owns the Curite power cable company. They manufacture insulators and conductors, and in Seymour, Connecticut, they make high voltage underground cable. So they make utility parts and equipment, which is pretty interesting for this program. So this is one Tesla Megapack. This is a 2-hour, pretty large size Tesla Megapack. And just like the others, it'll be used for demand management mostly, and backup power when needed. So we'll jump to the next slide here with the project overview. So no priority customer adders on this one. This is a straight incentive calculation based on their demand. And the calculated upfront incentive is $594,301, expected to install in 2027. So we'll move on to the resolution.
Did committee members have any questions about this one before we move to the vote? Okay, great. So is there a motion to approve resolution number 4 as it relates to C-Power?
So moved, Matt.
Thank you, Matt. And second?
I'll second, Rob.
Thank you, Rob. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you very much. Back to the team for the next batch.
All right, the next batch. This is an interesting one. This is Cadenza Innovations. So we'll jump the slide here. Cadenza Innovation is actually a manufacturer and designer of battery storage equipment. In this project, however, they're acting not only as the equipment provider, but as a developer. This is a nice aerial shot of their office complex and kind of this really big mixed use facility in Danbury. So it's formerly a very, very large office space, and it's currently under renovation to be modernized office space, but also to include 360 residential apartments that have various amenities or shops and restaurants and things like that. We actually visited Cadenza's location in Danbury back in the fall to see their development laboratory and where they piece together their equipment and ship out their batteries. Their batteries are not made in America currently, but they have told us that they're looking to possibly do that in either New York or Connecticut in the coming years. That is their goal. But right now, they're mostly a research, development, and assembly in Connecticut. So their plan for this particular project is it's at the apartments that are located at their home office in Danbury. It's going to be done in 2 phases, and it's going to be one of those rack mount systems that I showed a few slides earlier per apartment. They expect to install the first batch of 180 of these batteries paired with a Schneider inverter later, by the end of this year is their goal. That's on a construction timeline, so could be early next year. But they plan to install the second phase of an additional 180 batteries in one additional year, so by the end of 2025. So this is a project that's currently underway. It's currently under construction. Yes, see a hand up here.
Yeah, so I'm just curious, like, what is our underwriting criteria? It just seems like at a high level to me, odd that you'd have all these individual units and that somehow or another would be more efficient than mega pack battery that operated, across the whole complex or a portion of it. How do we look at this from an underwriting point of view? What does it have to, what sort of bar does it have to pass? And are we sort of just in the early stages where we're figuring out what works here? It just seems inefficient to have, 100 of these little packs.
Sure. I will start here, and Sergio, feel free to jump in if you like. But in this case, with the way that multifamily housing is metered, in this case, it's 360 individual customer meters. So in that case, the developer thought it would be simpler to instead just install 180 individual batteries tied to each meter. So that would give each unit their own private backup that they wouldn't have to necessarily share with the rest of the complex.
And what about the underwriting criteria? Like what, how do we decide if that's, economically, viable model?
I am going to pull up our benefit cost analysis calculator here, and I can, I'm not sure I'll be able to present it, but I can.
And I don't want to hold the whole group up. I mean, I'm happy to, get educated on it offline, but,
Sure.
I know we've got a lot to cover and a
I
little
had a lot of
time.
the same questions, Matt. So I
Okay.
think this is a really good one, especially because it's such a unique
Yeah.
sort of scenario where the developer manufacturer is also deploying it basically next door. And I think just I'll be very I guess I'll cut to the chase. Like I've also been on the tour, and I know that they are very committed to trying to bring more business to Connecticut, which is obviously a great thing, and we certainly want to see more battery deployment. I have some concern that we are subsidizing sort of R&D versus other intents for the program. Not saying that those other things can't be meeting the criteria as you're sort of raising, but just knowing a little bit more about cadenza than maybe some of these other projects it does raise some additional questions. And in addition to the economies of scale of a mega pack versus so many smaller ones.
Yeah, and I'll have one more question just so maybe you can try and hit them all. But I also worry about down the road, if there's like, the economies of chasing them down if 5 of the little battery packs don't work. Is it really going to be worth anyone's time at the Green Bank to go down there? Whereas if you had a larger system and there were, and it was failing in a way that served the whole project, then I think it would be, the sort of ability to look at our agreement with them and go down there and make sure everything's getting done right would just be a lot easier. I mean, this just looks like if there were ever any issues, we'd be having one of these board meetings where we say, 18 of them aren't working, and what are we going to do about it? So anyway, that's a couple of thoughts. Again, this new program, I get it, but I'm just trying to get my head around all those different facets.
Dominic, you had to.
Yes,
want to put your
maybe
question
to
out there?
add to the question queue here. I think it'd be helpful also to sort of review, we were talking about underwriting criteria, but like the mechanism for the incentive approval, if you will. I think I recall from a previous board meeting that there are certain bars that have to be met, but that it's somewhat of a formulaic calculation in terms of, if you have a certain amount of capacity or you meet certain conditions, that the amount of incentive and the approval for the incentive is maybe less discretionary than some other things. But maybe I'm misremembering that. So maybe an update on that would be helpful.
Technology.
Yeah, Dominic, let me address that one. So yes,
Lonnie also has her hand up. There might be another question to answer too. Lonnie, go ahead. Sorry, Sergio.
Oh, hi.
Yeah, no problem.
Oh, go, Sergio. Did you want to go first?
Well,
no, please.
Because we're queuing questions, so I'll make sure that
just sort of in general, with all of this stuff we're talking about, I know in some cases we bring in, we outsource oversight. We bring in companies who know how to really look at the stuff and measure it on a day-to-day basis. And I'm wondering, how much are we doing that with all of these things that we're pursuing now? I mean, it feels like, because I know we've turned to, some of those managerial companies to come in and kind of help explain things and make sure things are going the way that we've, contractually obligated ourselves to bless. So I'm wondering how much of that is happening.
Right, thank you. And I'll put a temporary moratorium on questions just so the staff can work through the ones that we have so far. Thank you.
Yeah, so let's address the incentive calculation. It's formulaic. It's purely formulaic. There is no objectivity here. So it depends. The upfront incentives depend on the size of the battery, and it's a per kW rate. So that, and you're going to see in the following slides that the upfront incentives is exactly the same for all batteries to the cent, and it's because it's based on the size of the battery. So that is one thing. There is absolutely no decisions being made from a incentive calculation. Second was what's the decision-making process? And I wanted to say that what we need from the technologies is what we require from the battery technologies is that they're able to meet the dispatch requirements, meaning are the batteries capable of discharging every non-holiday weekday from June through August between 3 and 8 p.m. If that's the case, if they meet all the safety requirements, which is a series of UL certifications, then the technologies per se are allowed to participate in the program. We only ask for those requirements because we want these batteries to discharge between 3 and 8 p.m. and this during the summer to lower the summer peak demand in the region. That's what's going to generate the savings. So as long as the technologies can meet those requirements, they are allowed into the program. That is the second thing. There was a question about probably troubleshooting batteries, right? The scale of the batteries troubleshooting. What if of these 360, I think the number was 18, if 18, let's say 20, 25 batteries fail. I see these no different than what we did with RCIP, right? We manage the troubleshooting. And yes, we have employees here that work with homeowners, with solar manufacturers to try to resolve any issues. This will be no different. Things will break down, batteries will break down, and we will have to address those issues later when they occur.
Sergio, can I also just yes. Add, you had said before that the requirement for getting in as technology was ability to meet the dispatch requirements. We do also have the requirement that all equipment carry at least a 10-year manufacturer warranty, and that the contractor provides a 10-year workmanship warranty, and that all equipment, in order to be eligible, has to meet UL 9540 certification, which is and energy storage safety industry standard certification.
Yes, thanks, Ed, for those additions. So again, the expectations is that within a few years, we have thousands and thousands of these units, not the Cadenza, but Teslas, all the battery manufacturers spread all over the state, and we will have to deal with those issues. That's the reason, and thanks for bringing that up, Ed, that we are requiring 10 years of warranties on the batteries and on workmanship. I think that's inevitable, and we're going to have to deal with those issues later.
There were two others. There was small versus large systems, and then there was oversight.
Small versus large, I think we don't see a difference as long as they help us. They can discharge at the same time, and they help us lower the seasonal summer peak demand. These batteries are welcome into the program.
I would just let me add to that, Sergio. I think, Matt, to your point, it is a bit of, or Dominic, it is a bit of the market trying to figure out what it's doing in the multifamily space, because some may see common areas as the place to provide the backup. But what we're finding in some research that we're doing with the Yale School of Public Health is that actually people who reside in individual units that have home medical device needs actually want to shelter in place rather than being in a common space. So the market's going to probably shake out over time in terms of the costs and benefits of individual unit security versus the whole versus common space. So this is,
the another big difference between battery, small and large batteries is that, as we've been telling you, these very large systems will deploy in, they'll go in the interconnection queue. They will deploy in 2, 3, 4, 5 years. However, the small ones like these systems, they can come online much faster. Maybe that's what Cadenza is targeting here, is a system that can be turned on fairly quickly. So that's what's going to happen with the small systems, the Tesla, the Solar Edge, the LG Chem batteries. The small batteries will come online fairly quickly, within a few months. The larger the system, the longer the waiting will be.
To add onto those points, with the smaller size systems, it might be a little bit easier to explain to the person renting the unit what exactly will be covered during an outage, electric wise. And to BG's point about staying in place during an outage, like it might just be easier for the renter to know exactly what they will be able to have covered during that outage. In a larger battery scenario, it's probably going to be harder to understand how many renters will be able to have some sort of resiliency measure during that outage, and for how long, unless there's a designated plan in place.
And you'll see in the last slide of our presentation here, where we talk about the New Power Cherry Street Lofts project, that is also multifamily. That's actually affordable multifamily, but it's metered completely differently. And they are installing one big Tesla Megapack to serve the whole property. They're also sub-metered, and they have a master meter on the property, whereas this one, Cadenza just makes a small to medium-sized residential commercial size battery. They don't have a product that's the size of a Megapack. So this is more, for them, this is an application of 360 residential units that are all considered individual to them for the purpose of interconnection.
And then there was a question from Chair Reed on oversight.
Sure. Could you elaborate a bit more on the question about oversight, please?
So, I mean, I think about things like the Jewish Community Center in Woodbridge, where the company had a great track record, but it outsourced part of the installation, and the part that they outsourced failed. And so suddenly they come back to us, wait a minute, it's not working. And the company's going, wait a minute, well, we did our part well. Oh, yeah, we outsourced, blah, blah. The same thing with the exposed wires and the squirrels eating them. It just, I mean, the kinds of things that we're doing aren't innovative and fabulous, and we really need to push ahead. And we're going to have these issues. This is life. This is how real life is. But I'm just wondering about, do we have oversight that can go out there and handle the day-to-day managerial issues when they arise? Because, pulling our folks out from doing yet a new deal and sending them out to check out squirrel problems or whatever else is going to happen. I'm just asking that.
Sure. Yeah. So in this program, what's a little bit different from the financing programs is that we don't issue any payments at all until the system is completely online and completely operational. That doesn't speak to your question about ongoing maintenance or ongoing issues after the fact. But we don't have any money that goes out the door until the project is fully operational and built, past interconnection, past inspections. We do have a team of inspectors. However, inspection per a recent PURA ruling, inspections in this program are actually at the customer's request, so they are optional. So if the developer, the Summit at Danbury, chooses to have the project inspected by the Green Bank, we would do that at our expense after the installation.
And we do collect an inspection form from the installer to have on file.
Yes. Yeah, we do require a self-inspection checklist as well.
And this is Matt, not my program, but the problems you were referencing do fall into my areas. I want to make clear one distinction, which is in all those instances, the Woodbridge project, which there's a long history there. We own those assets, so have a ongoing contract with the property owner to provide, in the case of Woodbridge, provide electricity to a PPA. So we're responsible for that asset performing. So when stuff hits the fan, it is us that is on the hook to resolve it. These assets, this is structured differently. We don't own these assets,
right,
and have that performance liability like we do on the financing program. So that's it. We want at some point, hopefully, I'll be presenting to you some batteries or multifamily that we will own, which we will have that liability. But I think that's the key difference from the examples you cite.
And we do actually, that reminds me, we do actually have an incentive clawback mechanism in the program. So if a battery is found to not be meeting the performance requirements, which in the case of passive dispatch, it's that it has to discharge 80% of its capacity during all those non-holiday weekdays, like Sergio mentioned, 90% of the events. If it doesn't perform to that standard, there's a process by which we'll notify the developer or whoever is responsible for operating the battery. And after so many notifications, and if it goes unresolved, then we would actually claw back the incentive. We would unenroll the project and request the money back. Yeah, that's just that's not our money in that case.
Yeah, but that's another incentive to keep the battery up and running, is that active performance incentive over time.
Yeah, so any project that's not performing at all just simply wouldn't receive any ongoing payments from the utilities for the active portion of the active dispatch portion for the performance incentives.
So the projects are incented to perform. If they don't perform, they lose that big incentive.
Right.
$4.5 million in that last slide, it would be a big loss if they weren't performing.
Right. So we do hold them accountable in that sense.
I think that was really helpful and answered a lot of questions. So I appreciate the dialogue on this one, especially because it is, a little bit different of a flavor. And hopefully we see many, many more of these types, and this will lay a good foundation for it. So I appreciate that. I did I do recognize I imposed a temporary moratorium on questions. I will lift that quickly if any others came out of that discussion. All right, then please continue on, team. All right, we're on the resolution. Okay. Was there anything on that last slide before you switched over to that needed to be covered, or I can't remember if we already went over that?
Just the total, which is on the resolution slide.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Oh, and I did have one question. Well, no, actually, I know the answer already. All right. Is there a motion to approve Resolution 5 as it pertains to cadenza?
So moved, Matt.
Thank you, Matt. Second.
Lonnie, I second.
Thank you, Lonnie. Thank you, Rob, too. I appreciate everybody jumping in. Is there all in favor? Sorry.
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Any abstentions? Great. Thank you so much. Resolution 5 passes. On to the next batch.
All right. We have 2 more batches. So next slide, please. So on to Redaptive. Redaptive is another company that joined Energy Storage Solutions earlier this spring. It came to us with 7 projects, all for Home Depots. They're located at various areas in the state. 5 of them are located in distressed municipalities designated by DECD. And these will all be used. They're all 2 megawatt Nerada power batteries, and they will be installed for demand management and backup power. Home Depot, while they're not a local or particularly interesting, big box retailer joining the program, we are excited to see them joining as many of them are located in a distressed municipality, but also that they can serve as sort of a resilience hub in the event of an outage when there's a natural disaster or some type of event.
I believe they're considered critical facilities in terms of if there's a natural disaster.
By the utilities?
By DEMS, the emergency management.
Great. So they do qualify as critical facilities as well, which is exciting. And we do actually, so most of them do receive a priority customer adder. So there is, actually on the next slide here, thank you. So there is a grid edge adder for one of them, and actually technically a small business adder for another, which Home Depot doesn't normally strike you as a small business. By the way that PURA has defined small business in this program, it's anyone with a annual peak demand of less than 200 kilowatts. So that I assume is just a smaller store with a smaller demand. Not too much else to exciting with this one. So these 7 projects total $4,891,252. And we'll move on to the resolution if there are no questions.
I only have one question, guys. On the prior slide, I think it mentioned 20 plus locations, and I asked only because I'm in Cheshire or Southington, and I go to Home Depot like at least once a month. So I'm just wondering, is there a reason why these set? I get the distressed municipalities, especially DC, representing those and managing those, but why these 7 or the other 2, say West Hartford, for example, versus say some other? Was there some logic behind it about the selection process other than the distressed municipalities?
So the selection process, so that was just done between Redaptive and the Home Depot company. They didn't actually explain why they chose the 7 stores that they did. They just presented us with their contract for the 7 stores. So unfortunately, I can't answer why for those 7.
Is there to the other point, actually, we've had this discussion at DCD about how they are considered like an emergency facility in case like disaster struck towns. So that's why for me, I'm very supportive. I just was wondering, of the other locations, is there a plan to expand or revisit this later so that this would probably come back to the board for additional locations at a future point?
I think there's a chance of that. In our conversations with Redaptive, they've in early conversations, they were a little they didn't talk much about the details of their projects. It took them about 2 months for them to tell us that their big box customer was Home Depot. So I think they just try to keep that information close to them until they actually have contracts signed. But Redaptive is a pretty large national energy service provider. I would not be surprised if this was not their only submission to the program. But we can certainly talk to them about that for the future tranches.
It might not
Yeah.
be immediately at this point because we have to pause the commercial
Right.
incentives as of
Yeah.
June 15th. So once we reevaluate the incentive levels for the commercial projects, we would assume Pura would give us the go-ahead to open up tranche 3 probably after December or whenever the final decision comes out for this year.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Robert, just to add this, that in early conversations with them, they mentioned their intent was to submit incentive request for each facility. So I guess, yes, the answer is, I think the
Yes,
expectation is that we're going to receive 13 more applications at least for Home Depots.
Right. What's the new? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Thank you. That's helpful.
Right. So onto the resolution. Are there any other questions?
I had one question just on the small business adder, and I just wanted to make sure we are airtight on that, and we're definitely good on that it should qualify, because that one also raised eyebrows for me of like, how could this possibly be? I don't know the criteria that well, but even a small Home Depot store is a very large store.
Right. So just for some idea here, the annual peak demand for their whole fleet of stores that they submitted ranged anywhere from, in this case, it was 197.5 for their peak demand. So they're right on the line. And then the average for the rest of them are in the 300s. There's one that's 600. They might have multiple uses there. So they are really right on the line, and we do verify with the utility. We don't just take the applicant's word for it. We verify their peak demand with the utility. So
I figured as much, but I just wanted to hear that because, that one.
It could also be, Hank, that they're more efficient. Maybe they have daylighting or something.
could be a new
Could be.
store.
So those are the other things we're going to want to explore with the efficiency fund on the other units, is how to make them more efficient. Yeah.
That's all great, and at some future point, I would love to dig in more and understand that, because you get all the other stores to get down to under 200 maybe, or whatever, but that's for another call, another project. So, were there any other questions from the team, from the committee? Sorry. All right. Hearing none, is there a motion to approve Resolution 6?
So move, Rob.
Thank you, Rob. A second?
Lonnie, second.
Thank you, Lonnie. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? No. Great. Thank you. All right. On to the next batch, Honeywell.
All right. So the final batch, very similar to the Redaptive and Home Depot projects. Honeywell has submitted a batch of 14 Walmarts in Connecticut. So similar to Home Depot, they can act as a resilience hub in the event of a natural disaster. And in this case, for these 14 projects, they're also planning to replace a fossil fuel generator, which is exciting because a lot of businesses wouldn't want to lose their generator just so they can have a second source of backup. So that actually triggers the priority customer adder. If you want to jump to the next slide, Brian, you can see that every project here gets one adder, and they don't stack. It's just one or the other, but we included the grid edge where applicable. So every project here gets a 25% increase in their upfront incentive. So if you could actually just jump back one slide, thank you. So again, Walmart, this is the same equipment that Redaptive is installing for Home Depot. It's a Narada power battery, that big 40-foot containerized battery that we showed on the first slide. And it's going to be installed really kind of scattered all across the state. And before I speak out of turn, Sergio, do you know if any of the remaining locations are planning to add storage to the remaining Walmarts?
I heard from them the same thing. They expect to submit 30 applications. Yeah. But as Sarah mentioned, if it will depend on the incentive levels that Pure approved, right, for next year or for tranche 3. Some of those projects may not be economical or financially viable, but we'll see.
And so jumping to the next slide, just wanted to point something out here. So as Sergio mentioned, the incentives are roughly the same for most of these projects. You'll see that some are about 700 and some are 829,000. That's not because of the stacked adders. That's because of the demand level for the customer. So similar to Home Depot, the demand for these sites, probably whether it's a super center or not, it can range again anywhere from the 200 and 300 up to 600 kilowatts in annual peak demand. So once you get over the 500 kilowatts of peak demand, it puts you into the lowest incentive category, the lowest value incentive category for our program. So that's why some have a lower incentive than others.
Hey, guys, 2 questions. One, I thought, and correct me if I'm wrong, and if we don't know it, we can move on. But during COVID, I thought Walmart, like Home Depot, was essentially allocated with that quote unquote emergency facility status, considering, food and warehousing and its impact to the communities. Do you guys know?
So I know that there are different definitions of critical facilities. In fact, they can differ by municipality. However, under the governor's order under COVID, both would fall under that. It may not be what DEMS is using to describe critical facilities. It may not be what Pura would want us to use, but they both do meet the criteria under that order.
Yep.
Right. Okay, cool. Second question, on the replacing of generators, is there, and they would be, I guess it's a 2-part question. One is, they're replacing the generators because of the beneficent, them being a beneficiary of this incentive? That's the first question. Are they replacing them? If not, would they keep them? It sounds like they are replacing it because they are going with this system and they are getting this benefit. That's the way I'm seeing it. And the second part of the question there is, what's happening to these replaced generators? Will they be repurposed into the Connecticut supply chain? Is there going to be some other small business or facility that could buy them, purchase them in bulk with installation from Walmart? So thank you.
So on the why they're replacing the generator and how the adder comes in. So there's a 25% adder on the battery if the customer is replacing the generator. If they're not, then they wouldn't get the additional benefit. So it would be 25% lower. And as for what they are doing with the existing generator, we could incorporate that maybe into the resiliency plan moving forward. So all these projects need to, yeah, I mean, we could certainly ask them. That wasn't part of the conversation, but I think that's a great question.
Yeah, but my only concern here is that if they take them and sell them out of state at a discount, technically it's a Connecticut taxpayer benefit they're receiving, and then they get a benefit outside of the state. So if they're going to repurpose it within the state to someone else who could use it, obviously we want to get as much energy storage systems as we can, but still there's people who have power issues. and that would be very helpful. So I would really appreciate if you could at least maybe ask them, follow with the board at a future date on what they're doing with these generators. That'd be really appreciative.
Absolutely. That's a great thought.
And just adding here, I think that I didn't know all of them were replacing the generator, which is super
Yeah.
interesting. Like, I mean, it could be a corporate decarbonization goal for Walmart. It could be something like that. So what they do with the generators in the secondary market, what this raised in my mind was the whole exercise we went through with Pura in terms of the decarbonization of batteries. You know, could we create a clean energy standard where we're actually reducing GHG emissions through batteries? And we didn't see it much regularly by just doing this. But when we pull out the generators, my bet is if we go back to these guys and look at how long the generators were on and how much fuel they actually used, that when we do that math, it will start to add up, you know, in terms of having a value. And Pura may want to create a price and create an incentive to, in that case, Rob, they would probably replace or take out the generator and just expire it, right? Recycle it to bring it outside of the decarbonized economy. But your point is well taken. We'll capture that data.
Perfect. Thank you.
Great.
Yeah, maybe just one follow-on question to that is maybe we could look at, I mean, they're getting an adder for it. So maybe to get that adder, they have to retire the generator or some other acceptable use. And if that's not really attractive, like if they could get more selling it, maybe we should look at whether the adder should be, you know, enough that if it doesn't take much more to get the generator retired, that might be more in line with our mission. You know, so.
It's a great point, Matt.
Yeah, so I just put in the chat, maybe when this gets paused, I assume the staff maybe could pull together sort of a summary of the costs and, you know, how much per KW, what are the soft costs, you know, just areas where we can look at how this played out in the market and are there little tweaks we can make that we can get, you know, more bang for our buck.
Yeah, Matt, that's a great recommendation. So the EM&V work, the evaluation, measurement, and verification work that is currently underway, that Guidehouse is doing for us, will uncover all these things that you asked. You know, the cost per KW, you know, the emission reductions, etc. I think it would be nice to come to the board with a summary of that EM&V report.
Yeah, I promise this will be the last time I say it, but you know, it's just a new program, and back when fuel cells were new, we over-incented them. When solar was new, we probably over-incented that. And you know, it was that iterative process of lessons learned and listening to the market. You know, the frustrations with too many frequent changes, etc. It took a little more time, but you know, it's I think that's the process. So. That's my thought.
All right, this has been a really good conversation, but I just checked the clock, and we are a half hour behind now. But I think we've done good work, so we're saving future us maybe a half hour somewhere along the way. So, but we've got 4 more resolutions and some other items over the 26 minutes to go. So no pressure to everybody. Are there any final questions for this particular batch and resolution? Or is there a motion to approve Resolution 7?
So moved, Rob.
Thank you. Second?
I'll second, Lonnie.
Thank you, Lonnie. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Resolution is approved. On to item F and new power. Sergio?
Thanks, Sergio. So on to our last item here. This is an incentive recalculation for a project that has already been approved. This is New Power Cherry Street, which I had mentioned earlier. It's a multifamily housing facility, mixed use. There's community space. There's a charter school, and it's located in Bridgeport. It's 1 Tesla Megapack, 1 4-hour Megapack. And it was the first hybrid calculation that we made in ESS. And it was originally approved last year in June by the board. We found over the last year in our discussions with the developer that the project really wasn't going to pencil, most likely. And I know if Bert and Mariana are on the call, they did some review as well with the developer to, verify that the project was really moving towards being canceled. Being that it's multifamily affordable housing, it's 160 or so units. It really will drive a lot of benefits for the program and for Connecticut, and help the Green Bank meet our goals and the program administrators meet our goals for this program. There were a couple points in the original calculation that were imperfect, and I think there was some room for improvement for the formula moving forward. One of which was that the residential portion was not fully benefiting from the adders because it's a hybrid project. The residential portion would receive a much larger incentive and the commercial portion would be much lower. But the 50% project cost cap was really hindering the residential portion, so it couldn't fully benefit from those adders. The C&I portion was not calculated proportional to its demand. Instead, the full site demand for the full master meter was being applied, which brought the overall incentive rate down for the C&I portion, instead of accounting for the fact that some of that demand went to residential and shouldn't have been counted against the C&I demand, bringing the rate down. And finally, the low income incentive rate increased in 2024. So PURA approved a few 50% increases in the total incentives for residential portions, and it allowed us to calculate multifamily affordable housing at the full low income rate rather than the underserved rate, which would allow this project to receive up to $900 per kilowatt hour, inclusive of the grid edge adder, as opposed to the original 600. So with all those things being considered, and in the attempt to make this project viable and to actually get it in the ground, we recalculated with all those ideas in mind, and it resulted in an increase of the incentive. The straight calculation would have been a little bit over $2 million, but because we have a limit of 50% of the total project cost, rather than a 50% of each portion of the project cost, it brought the incentive from $1,020,771 up to $1,837,500. So I assume there will probably be some questions on this one, so we can just jump right into those. This was a bit of a complicated one.
Ed, if I can add something, and I want to go back to a question Dominic asked about the calculation, if it was formulaic or not. And when we designed the program, we didn't foresee this scenario where there is a hybrid project. We thought it was only going to be either residential or C&I, and there's a formula for each of those customer classes. However, in this case, it was a combination of both. So we had to make some decisions, and this calculation was subjective. It's something that we're going to try to bring to PURA in these annual review of the program to remove any subjectivity from the calculation of the incentive. But this scenario was not foreseen when we designed the program.
I should also state, so in the earlier project, the Cadenza project that I mentioned, that is mixed use and it's residential and commercial. But because it's residential standard rate, market rate housing, it's considered for our purposes to be commercial. So if this same type of a project was applied for the summit at Danbury, it would have just been one straight calculation. But because affordable multifamily housing qualifies under the residential incentive rates, which are higher, that's why we had to make the hybrid calculation in this case.
It's Matt. Two things. One is, so this is the project that has the sub metering, a master meter and a bunch of sub meters that you
Yes.
referenced earlier. And two, I don't really have a lot of questions other than I'm a little surprised, and Sergio, I appreciate your comment that the sort of alternative method could be essentially, half as high as or almost twice as much as the other method. That seems like a ton of interpretive discretion, even understanding this is unusual. So I guess the only question is, are we comfortable that the discretion that was exercised in this reevaluation technique is warranted and, would stand up to scrutiny? Because that's a big delta. If we thought the max was 1 million and we applied some reevaluation and got 1.8, I just want to make sure that understanding that this project wasn't anticipated, but that we really have kind of said, how will this look to someone looking at it, with a jaundiced eye? Is it really within the methodology? I guess is the question.
Matt,
Sure.
I think that's a great question. Ed, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, so in the, so two things that happened, if we hadn't made any type of a subjective change to the way the incentive was calculated, and we only applied the new incentive rates to it, it still increased the incentive on the residential side from, it was actually $450 per kilowatt hour to $900 per kilowatt hour. And on the C&I side, by re-examining the way that we used or that we applied the C&I demand portion, which I do believe that originally it was just not fair to apply the full site demand to only part of the site. By bringing it into a lower demand category, it brought up the incentive in that case from 125 to about 217. But I do feel comfortable, or I would feel comfortable defending this to Pura in that it really, it was a project that otherwise wouldn't have been able to happen. And I think that re-examining the formula and also applying it moving forward is fair, and I would be comfortable to do this again.
Yeah, and I'll say what you described sounds reasonable to me. I only asked the question because it's a little bit of a black box,
Yeah.
not knowing what the criteria are, but certainly those two elements you just mentioned, do have a common sense attraction to them.
We have a much more detailed spreadsheet that shows the calculation in every single step, which I'd be happy to share with you or Pura if requested.
Thanks, Ed.
All right, thank you. Is there a motion to approve resolution 8?
So moved.
Thank you, Matt. Second.
Lonnie, I'll second.
Thank you, Lonnie. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, the resolution passes. Thank you. And on to item number 5, and I'll turn it over to Mackie.
I have one more slide, this one, and I will be very brief. Yeah, next slide, Brian, please. Yeah, so in the interest of time, I'm going to be incredibly brief. This is a status of the project as of today, after today's approvals of 61 megawatts. Our total, I'm talking about the non-residential portion, the bottom half of the slide, the total approved projects in tranche 2 is 100.01 megawatts. So we are officially at capacity. Tranche 2 that was supposed to last until December of 2027 is out of capacity. It's an incredible interest in the program due to not only the generous incentives that we're providing, but also by the savings opportunities provided to customers because of the peak demand management opportunities. So now we are left with tranche 3. We're going to go to Piora in this annual review to say we need to open tranche 3, even though tranche 2 was only expected to open in January of 2028. We cannot put the market on hold for 4 years, but we are well ahead of schedule. On the resi side, the bottom half of the slide, just underwhelming interest due to so many factors. The non-participation of important players in the residential battery storage space, like Tesla, Sonova, who just joined the program. We are working with them to get them up to speed and be ready to sell their product and services. Robert, you mentioned last time about Solar Edge and LG Energy. They are working with the DERMS provider to integrate and be able to join the program officially. So anyways, we expect next year an uptick on the residential side, but it's behind. It's behind, no doubt.
Thank you, Sergio. Yeah, we will certainly be, I am sure, discussing that on a future call. So appreciate the update, though, and that's, congrats on the achievement in the other programs. And it's a good problem to have to go back and say,
totally,
hey, this is too popular. We need to advance the timeline here. All right.
Thank you.
With that,
thank you all.
Of course. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 5, I'll turn it over to Mackie.
I'm going to turn it over to Catherine Duncan to present this project.
Hi, so this is a CPACE project in Manchester, and the company is Hockenham Flats, and the operating company is a Toyota dealership. It's Lynch Toyota. Right now, we're doing the first project of 2. The second we'll see next year is for their used car dealership, and the project size is 298 kilowatts, and they're building carports on site. So next slide, please. And these are the new slide formats that we designed over the last couple of months with you. And the loan terms you can see, and the financial metrics, you'll see that the SAR is 1.01, and that's because they're doing carports. It's more expensive than a roof mount. It's a 10-year loan, and the standard interest rates, but you'll see that the DSCR is a very healthy 2.09. Next slide, please. So, maybe can we make it a little bit bigger?
We can't.
We can't? Okay. I don't know if everyone can see that well enough, but this is to replace the tear sheet that we used to use. And I think the key thing of interest here is that this is one of those transactions where the annual SIR, other than in the first year, is below 1. And that's, again, because these are both carports and also, there's a short term. But the owners are very cognizant of the cash flow here, and they specifically want the carports. We did go back and discuss it with them, and they want the carports because their roof will not support the solar, and they're not interested in, doing construction work on the roof. In addition, they look forward to not needing to clean the snow off the cars. So they're protecting the cars. Okay. Are there any questions?
Just point out the shorter term obviously means higher annual repayment amounts. Short 10 years over the typical 20-year term we see for solar, which is the primary driver on the low annual SIR. On the flip side, their interest rate is much lower. So that sort of is the attractiveness of the shorter term.
Questions? No? Okay, so we can move to the resolution.
All right, is there a motion to approve the resolution?
I motion. So move, Rob.
Thank you, Rob. Second.
I'll second Lonnie.
Thank you, Lonnie. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Aye. Or for in favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions? The resolution passes. All right, on to investment program updates and recommendations, and I'll turn over to Lee and Larry.
Thanks, folks. So wanted to start us off today, if we can go next slide. Reorienting a little bit and grounding in Public Act 21115. As folks know, its passage in June 2021 enabled a new phase of the Green Bank's efforts to carry out our mission, broadening our scope and deepening our commitment to environmental infrastructure, in addition to our focus on clean energy. This legislation has provided us a framework to be innovative and to mobilize investment into projects that confront climate change by addressing the urgent need not just for clean energy, but also environmental infrastructure, as defined as structures, facilities, systems, services, and improvement projects related to water, waste and recycling, climate adaptation and resiliency, agriculture, land conservation, parks and recreation, and environmental markets, including but not limited to carbon and ecosystem services. Next slide, please. As we've worked to develop financing products and programs for environmental infrastructure, our strategy is evolving, but in a nutshell, it's threefold. One, to expand existing program offerings to include environmental infrastructure measures, as with Smart E-Loan and CPAY's climate adaptation and resilience and water measures. To pursue bespoke opportunities through Green Bank Capital Solutions Open Rolling RFP, which is what we're bringing to you today, and to determine longer-term strategic program design opportunities. So those things from pink here that would roll up into or warrant programmatic design and development into the orange bucket. Next slide, please. For projects that do not meet programmatic criteria, Green Bank Capital Solutions was approved by the Board of Directors to allow for review, competitive selection, and award through an open RFP process. It allows us to receive requests from the market to finance projects within the scope of our comprehensive plan. Prior investments you folks are quite familiar with include Butterfly and Positive. And an expansion of the RFP from clean energy to also include environmental infrastructure, which is what we're bringing via resolution today, and as detailed in the memo. This is an important next step in this expanded authority as per the Public Act. This request is being brought in support of FY24 comprehensive plan targets, and that is to launch or expand existing financing products for clean energy to support environmental infrastructure. Next slide, please. So I wanted to just detail, in the vein of what potential use cases could we one day be bringing you under the vein of environmental infrastructure through the open rolling RFP. Three that I'll just pull forward. These are discussions that, we hope if there's an expanded instrument through the Capital Solutions RFP process to be able to explore further. One of them we can already do. This first one, quantum biopower. Quantum is a prior investment through not through Capital Solutions, I suppose, expanding Quantum's ability to receive more municipally generated food waste. So that connects to the environmental infrastructure waste and recycling vertical. Working on their campus to upgrade equipment specifically for municipally sorting municipally generated food waste, pursuing upgrades to their gas processing to be able to do vehicle grade renewable natural gas, and in other ways to think about how they could potentially create a hub and spoke model for receiving food waste and treating it to then send it on to their processing facility. So that's one potential use case, is the business expansion of quantum biopower. Another, there's a company called Cambium Carbon that creates carbon smart wood products. They target wood impacted by disease, decay, disaster, and development. And instead of that wood entering the landfill, they partner with local arborists and millers to recycle, rescue, and upcycle it as a carbon negative wood material with effective workforce development considerations. They're working with other municipalities, big municipalities in the East Coast, and are, as a former Yale spinout, they're curious about potentially expanding their business into Connecticut. And then the last, again, of the 3 potential use cases I'm using to color in what might be down the line in terms of projects that we would bring back to committee, assuming and hoping that the RFP is expanded to enable this, is a park project right in Hartford. This is Riverfront Recapture, which is the nonprofit that already operates a number of parks along the river. They've already acquired 60 acres on the Hartford-Windsor town line to build a new riverfront community park that services an environmental justice community that's otherwise been walled off from recreation opportunities and certainly from river access. Near-term work would involve working capital to complete the master planning project. Longer term, they'd be looking for $25 to $50 million and would need to have some kind of bridge support or working capital for construction grants. Elements are, this project has everything: wetland enhancement, reducing runoff, enhancing water quality, community park and recreation assets like a fishing pier or pavilion, brownfield remediation on site, connectivity to the then completing a 7-mile trail system, which would connect down right into the heart of Hartford, including to our office. So I just use that to color in a couple potential examples of projects that might potentially come through Capital Solutions if it were to be expanded to include environmental infrastructure, with the caveat that we could already do quantum biopower under our existing clean energy RFP. And then in terms of the capital expenditures, in terms of this would be as detailed in the memo. In fact, in the interest of time, I'll just say all of these points are as covered in the memo. So it is in keeping with the existing open rolling RFP process, how we would handle things like capital expenditures, financial statements, who an eligible proposer might be, what our role is, and how we would select and award potential lendees, how we would mitigate and manage risk as part of the evaluation and due diligence process, the requirements that we would instate for environmental infrastructure and financial impact, again, all in keeping with the existing RFP process and just expanded to include environmental infrastructure. So I think in the interest of time, I'll pause there for questions, not wanting to just recap every little thing we tucked into the memo.
This is Dominic. It's more of a statement and less of a question, but just appreciate the beginning of this next phase and sort of outlined in the previous slide, and thinking about, strategically expanding the tools that we already have at our disposal and that we know work and that we're familiar with as we move into this new area, and opening the door for us to look at specific one-off opportunities while we're building out the strategic programs. And I know that Lee and the team have been working on some of those strategic programs, and as those come together, having the ability to kind of look at specific projects to demonstrate both internally and externally what this might look like, I think would be a useful thing.
Thanks, Dominic. I'll layer on to that just to say, before we go raise a fund to go do a completely new book of business, the expansion of the RFP allows us, exactly as Dominic points out, to be able to test and better understand a potential type of transaction.
All right. Is there a motion to approve Resolution 10? I'll move to approve Resolution number 10. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, the resolution passes. I'll have to check my Robert's rules to see if it's been a while since I've seen if chair for a committee can do that. But anyway, all right, on to the next item, and just checking my cheat sheet here. It looks like this is Bert and Fiona. So I don't know if Bert's back through the tunnel yet. Estelle is fast, but it's not that fast.
How you doing, Bert? All right, he might not be back just yet. Why don't we go?
Bert's not back. I can do the next one.
update.
Yeah.
We'll come back to that one and we'll do the Smarty loan update.
Great.
So as the committee will probably remember, we launched or we expanded Smarty to include environmental infrastructure measures in line with our expanded mission. We've been working with outside organizations such as Circa, DEEP, a bunch of others to identify measures. We worked in deployment to get those approved once we had those narrowed down. And we launched, we came up with the consolidated list of measures. We launched in January the phase one of these, and these were really energy adjacent measures. And these were where we didn't need a new contractor base totally. So we worked with primarily electricians to get these put in place. And we've had our first project in there right in February, I believe. Phase two, we just launched in around Earth Day. These are where we had to develop new contractor relationships. These included things like some landscaping related measures and some other water related things. Now we're starting to look at phase three. Matt, I know that you in particular had wanted us to brief you before we moved on to that. And with kind of you wanted a rollout plan on the whole thing, which we have run by you, but kind of updating you as where we are on that. Yeah. With regard to phase three, which includes septic and waste and dam financing. We are not ready to roll out the vast majority of those. We're going to be working on those over the summer, kind of to better understand those. What are the requirements for the measures? And also reviewing with our partner agencies to make sure there wasn't anything that we missed in other spaces. I do want to highlight one measure on septic that we would like to move forward with sooner rather than later. And that is the installation of a backflow valve where homes are connecting to the sewer. This has particular interest to the Green Bank as we're working with the Blue Hills Community Association and on a grant that we received and passed through to them, helping address some of the flooding issues in North Hartford. And we're really looking to help fill the gaps around these backflow preventer installations where there's already grant funding, but also help the homeowners build a more efficient home as they're moving back in. So ideally, we can help close any gap around the backflow valve and then do something from an efficiency or solar perspective. We're still working on the details of that campaign. So just a quick update, nothing to vote on, but just any questions as we're proceeding. Cool. With that, I'll pass it back to Bert and Fiona.
Let's see, Bert, you there?
Yeah, I'm here, complete with the conductor in the background, so apologize for that. I'm not sure what's up on the screen.
We're on the Smarty loan description screen, the first one.
Yeah, just to frame everybody, this is the pilot program for our Smarty loan, and if we can go to the next slide. Again, we just left Baltimore, so they're giving us all that good information that you get normally.
I couldn't make out what Bert said. Was he taking a pause for the announcements to finish, or did we lose him?
Yeah, did we lose you, Bert? We can't hear you, Bert.
He's on airplane mode.
Yeah, he's in transit. in transit, juggling balls.
Sorry, you guys. now. Can you, somebody raise their hand if they can hear me?
We can hear you. Go ahead, Bert.
Okay, great. Okay, sorry about that. The wonders of technology here. So in any case, this is creating stress on our lenders, not to improve, not to exceed rates, compressing their margins. We came up with this program to have a link deposits with one of the lenders who was going to be leaving the program. We worked this out. The deployment committee approved it last May, a year ago, and it's been successful. It retained the lender. They put on almost $2 million in loans, but the program has a pilot limit of $2 million, as well as an endpoint of June 30th. We're going to be revisiting the program overall when we come to the board in June. We're likely to extend it. However, we need a little extra runway as we get into the high season for putting on transactions and likely to breach that $2 million level. So can we go to the next? Oh, before we go to the next slide, could you go back one slide, please? Just to highlight the program cost. Now, the bottom that's highlighted in yellow. If we can get to slide 47. Thank you. So you'll see the program cost is $34,000 thus far, and we had estimated about 19,000. Most of the increase, over 80%, is due to the higher for longer interest rates. We were using a Fed forecast, in fact, forecast from the Federal Reserve, so that forecast did not hold up because inflation has been a bit sticky. It's not come down as quickly as they thought, so they're holding the rates up. So if we can go to the next slide, that shows you the increase in interest rates that we had to put through for the program, which the board approved in July and became effective in September of last year. And go to the next slide.
And it, as you said,
so this is the current ask. It's that since we're running out of room, it's to raise the limit to 2.5 million, which is the deployment committee's maximum approval level. We're not going to extend the program end date. It's still retaining that. We're reviewing the program. We're quite likely to ask the board for an extension of the program, as we have one major lender out of the market. They had previously been doing about half of the program volume. So if we were to end this program, we would likely lose this particular lender, and that would dramatically cripple the program. So that's the reason for moving ahead with this increase at this time. So the next slide should be the resolution, I believe. And there you go. So back to you, Chair Reed. For any questions.
How did you put that? We got it wrong.
Any questions from the committee?
All
right, hearing none, is there a motion to approve resolution 11?
So approved. I approve.
Thank you, Chair Reed. Thank you. Is there a second? Thank you. I didn't quite catch who that was, but somebody did, I'm sure. Thank you, Matt. Okay. And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? No. All right, the resolution passes, and we did number 7. And so now I believe we're on to number 8, other business.
Yeah,
Brian.
Yeah, just real quickly, thank you all for the additional time here. There's a possibility of us coming back because our next deployment committee meeting is in September. There's a possibility of a special meeting in July that we're thinking about. Our team is wrestling with CPACE new construction and thinking about large transactions and how our criteria in terms of the impact that a large transaction would deliver, how we wrestle with the trade-offs of investing our limited resources in such large transactions. So our team's going to wrestle with it for the next couple of months. We've got them looking at certain criteria and parameters, prioritizing those parameters. We're going to have a discussion around those parameters to see if we can get comfortable in terms of bringing forward a discussion point. But I just wanted to give a heads up about that. If we don't end up calling the meeting, I'll report out to the deployment committee just in terms of the exercise they're going through right now. It's good that the team is wrestling with these sorts of trade-offs. So you could imagine, you know, a new construction project, $5 million, zero carbon building in a well-to-do community versus a trade-off of utilizing those resources to deliver more benefits in maybe a vulnerable community. So those are the sorts of things that we're wrestling with. So we may call a special meeting. If we don't, I'll do an update by email. That was the only other business I had.
Great. Thank you so much, Brian. And thank you to everyone on the call for sticking it out. We ended up only needing an extra 11 minutes beyond the requested 90. So I really appreciate it. But I think we covered a lot of great ground. I think we dug into some questions that will, you know, the answers to which will serve us very well going into the future and help, you know, just update our framework on how we're doing things. So really appreciate it. And, you know, again, always inspiring to see how much good work is going on out there. So really appreciate the team's effort on all of this. So with that, I would just request a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right, and we got all sorts of seconds and fourths and fifths. I'm just going to take that means yeah, I think we have the number of votes. We are adjourned. Acclamation. That's the word I'm looking for. All right. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone.
Bye.